Welcome to today's episode of The Square, another in the series of architecture and film. I'm Brandon Carmichael.
Oh, it's James Adams, multifamily sector.
And so this has, I guess we could call it a tradition. It's our second one.
Second one, it makes it a tradition.
Yeah.
I'm an Aggie.
Second holiday film episode for architecture and film.
Oh,
And because you can never have too much Die Hard, we...
Can you? No,
yeah.
you can't.
Yeah, you can't. We picked Die Hard for the second year in a row.
We could have done Die Hard 2. We could have done Die Hard 3.
We could have.
We could have done Die Hard
Adam would not let
4,
us.
But we came back to the original.
Yeah.
Where it all began.
So we are comparing and contrasting two movies that they seem pretty logical to go together.
Oh, totally. I usually watch these back to back at Christmas.
100%. Die Hard and It's a Wonderful Life. Because George Bailey and Bruce Willis have so much, Jimmy Stewart and Bruce Willis have so much in common.
Which I got to start this off with my question from last time we talked about Christmas movies, holiday movies. Has your oldest seen Die Hard yet?
No.
Is this the year?
No.
10 years old, coming up 10 years old.
10 years old.
Not the year.
Not yet. And here's the thing. I'm sure there's 10-year-olds out there. I'm sure there's probably younger than 10-year-olds that have seen Die Hard. I just don't think I'm there yet.
Get it. My daughter was 5. I waited. Yeah. No.
She's walking around the house with a ballpoint pen as a cigarette, quoting Bruce Willis lines at 7.
Yippee-ki-yay. No, she's not seen it yet still. And she's now almost 16. But I think it's not.
But is that because...
She doesn't care.
Yeah.
I don't think she cares about it.
She needs to sit down with old dad and... Yeah. So we're going to do something a little bit different this year because I love watching, particularly movies I've already seen, the older trailers.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to start with the Die Hard trailer, and then we'll come back for a couple seconds, and then we'll watch It's a Wonderful Life. So here's the Die Hard trailer.
It's Christmas Eve in L.A.
California.
Is Daddy coming home soon?
Well, we'll see what Santa and Mommy can do, okay?
And New York cop John McClane has come to see his wife.
I missed you.
Instead, he's going to have to save her.
Sit down.
Within this skyscraper high above the city, 12 terrorists have declared war.
They're about to be taught a lesson against the real use of power.
They're as brilliant
because I am interested in the $640 million in your vault.
as they are ruthless.
And I'm telling you, you're just gonna have to kill me. Okay. We do it the hard way.
Now, the last thing McClane wants...
Think, damn it, think.
...is to be a hero.
Where's Holly? Hey, Tucker! Where?
But he doesn't have a choice.
What does he think he's doing? Job.
They have already killed one hostage.
This channel is reserved for emergency calls only.
Lady, do I sound like I'm one of the pieces? He's inside? Who is he? Who are you then? You are most troublesome for a security guard.
Sorry, wrong guess, huh? Would you like to go for double jeopardy?
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay, mother.
You just destroyed a building. I am in charge of this situation.
I got some bad news for you. From up here, it doesn't look like you're in charge of Jack.
He is alone, he is tired, and he hasn't seen dipping squat from anybody down here. Hey, pal, how you feeling?
All things being equal, I'd rather be in Philadelphia.
And you'll have it.
Only John can drive somebody that crazy.
He's an easy guy to like.
Come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
And a hard man to kill. Bruce Willis. Die Hard.
Got invited to the Christmas party by mistake. Who knew?
Wow, that was great.
Yeah.
Love it.
80s trailers, baby.
Still holds up.
It's a genre all its own.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now we'll roll right into, very naturally, It's a Wonderful Life.
Look, who are you? I told you, George, I'm your guardian angel.
What is it you want, Barry? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Welcome home, Mr. Bailey.
Sentimental hogwash.
I wish I had $1 million. Hot dog! Mr. and Mrs. Martini, welcome home.
This is what I wished for.
You see, George, you really had a wonderful life.
Merry Christmas!
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right. That one was a little different.
Yeah.
Not sure
Not
that one
quite
holds
as
up as well, but
many guns and action shots.
yeah.
I do think, though, that one of the things that's interesting is we were kind of joking around about these two being paired together, and then something about it resonated, like, actually, that'd be kind of a fun challenge. And we jumped in there. I found a lot more similarities than I expected in terms of, the main characters and what they were, how we empathize with them and what we are, what they're going through. But I think the first one is neither of them was meant to be a holiday film the way that they are. I know.
You're right.
They're both holiday films, but they weren't set out that way.
Well, I think Die Hard was, but we'll go with that.
Fair enough.
No, I say that because I just need to defend an argument we're not going to have.
You're not going to have it with me because I believe it's a holiday movie.
But let's back up a little bit more. Everyone knows these movies, we think, but in case you don't know these movies, It's a Wonderful Life, directed by Frank Capra, 1946.
Yep.
Donna Reed, Jimmy Stewart, our main characters in that main actors.
Your favorite character, Lionel Barrymore's Henry Potter.
Yes, the evil Henry Potter, one of the worst antagonists of all time. But then we can.
By the way, he just truly does not give a care. Like he sits there in that wheelchair and could care less about the world.
Exactly. Which our other movie,
yes,
Die Hard.
Yep.
Made basically 42 years later, 1988.
88, yeah.
Starring Bruce Willis.
Yep.
And Bonnie Bedelia.
Yes, and Alan Rickman.
And of course, Alan Rickman as our and Alan Rickman as our antagonist in a deliciously evil role. It's fantastic. And of course, Bruce Willis is amazing in that. But that was directed by John McTiernan, again, 1988. So both these movies too were a couple more
based on books,
based on
stories.
Books.
Yeah.
Both were low budget movies. Both were almost entirely filmed on a set. Let me clarify. One of those sets is a 35-story tower.
Yeah.
That was actually a headquarters.
That was their offices, yeah.
The other one was a 90-acre ranch in Encino. But
except for the pool scene.
A couple of scenes.
In the Beverly Hills.
Pool scene is in the Beverly Hills High School for It's a Wonderful Life. And for Die Hard, a lot of the scenes are filmed where the hostages are kept at the top of the tower, spoiler alert, on the 30-something floor, and that is where the headquarters of the Nakatomi, the U.S. headquarters of the Nakatomi Company are in this set, and that was actually filmed on a set outside of the tower, which was a recreation of or inspired heavily by Falling Water from Frank Lloyd Wright.
Frank Lloyd Wright,
First architecture touch today.
So I'm curious because the set for Bedford Falls that was on the 90-acre set in Encino you were talking about, that was actually reused from a movie called, I'm going to get this wrong, Cinnamon, I think? Cimarron.
Cimarron, yeah.
And Frank Capra made a few changes, like he put trees down the middle of the road and whatnot, but it was largely just reused.
Yeah.
And there is very much kind of a feel of an American everyman kind of town to it.
Yeah.
What are some of the architectural things that kind of stand out to you?
Okay, that's a great question. So it is interesting because I think and I'm going to long answer.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's great about that movie, and we'll come back to this, is that movie really gained traction as a holiday movie.
Right.
Late 70s, 80s, right? And that's a sense, I think, of a time of high urban decay in America, which created that nostalgia. Not to mention they played it on TV like nonstop.
Yeah.
Like Christmas Story to follow later. But of a time period that really captured the ideal of American life at a certain time period in this country. And to that end, one of the key things is the front porch. The front porch in those neighborhoods, in that town, which is based off of two different there's arguments about two different small towns in New York and New Jersey that it's allegedly based off of, but they are, older cities that have a town center and have neighborhoods built around them. They have front porches out front. There is awareness. There is accountability of the neighborhood. I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit, but I'm going to say that if you think of Jane Jacobs' masterpiece, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, and what makes cities work and even towns work is what occurs in a 24-hour cycle in a neighborhood. And part of that in the evenings and in the mornings is awareness of your neighbors, visual and a connection, and that is captured in this town on this set. Longest answer ever to your...
No, that's good. I'm curious though, like how much do you think the context of the 40s played in? I mean, you've got post-war, you have Jimmy Stewart, who wasn't just an actor that said he was going to sign up for the war. I mean, he went and flew missions. He demanded to be able to go and do that. You have
American hero.
Yeah, Frank Capra coming back, some of the writers. Yeah. So there was this idea of, and I think in both of these movies, but especially in It's a Wonderful Life, it's a story of values, right? Like he has this idea that going and building, potentially even as an architect or an engineer, these big buildings is going to be what brings value to his life, and he struggles with that pretty much the whole film until he comes back to this idea of relationship and family and the impact you have on the lives of others. Yeah, and that's all set in this kind of post-war feeling that even the people watching the movie would still be in.
A time of hope after a really, really dark time that lasted not just the war, but for us here and in some other countries as well, in a massive depression. Even Germany had seen that as well. We were living through it all through the 30s, and this is that moment born of hope and optimism, and really the catapulting the American can-do spirit again out into a new world with new technology and new aspirations for what America could be, at least from a developmental, industrial side. We still had a long way to go in other areas. Yeah. But that was kind of what this movie captured, and I think why it holds up. Partly because of that, but again, more so because of this redemption arc and this awareness. This character, not redemption's the wrong word, but the self-redemption, perhaps, of learning to recognize what brought that value. And I think a point you started to bring up earlier about Jimmy Stewart, the idea of returning from the war and atrocity scene and the effort spent and this desire to do something great, and also this appreciation for loved ones and family and things you were returning to for all those who didn't come back. Yeah. I think, and
which is a strong theme in the film because you basically get to see your life as if you hadn't existed. Yeah. And they're coming back, and there's a lot of the people that they went to the war with that don't exist anymore. Yeah.
There's something about lessons learned. I think it's part of that arc. Yeah. And you get a little bit of that in Die Hard too. Surprisingly, you do. You do get this. I think that one of the secondary characters, I can't think of his name. He plays a man named Winslow on a very good TV show called Family Matters. Oh, yeah. And he plays
Reginald. Yes. Hold on, I'll find it.
But he plays an officer.
Reginald Vell Johnson.
Vell Johnson, yes. Does a phenomenal role in this. Yes. Small part, but it's an important part of a lesson learned about his own journey, because he is an officer who, spoiler alert, shot an unarmed kid. Yep. He thought was armed, and from that was then put to a desk job, and he has his own arc of redemption that is partly born upon the main character in Bruce Willis. I think I want to mention too is that to juxtapose these characters, we have not talked about this at all, but I'm trying to envision also a post-Vietnam War era that influenced from the 70s on into this movie, Die Hard in the 80s, and its production, and the role and the rise of characters such as John Rambo in First Blood. Yeah. And this idea.
A lot of the 80s action movies.
Deer Hunter. Yeah. A lot of these movies that came just 10 years before, less than 6-7 years before this movie, and the rise of the action hero and a very different character type. He also has a redemption arc and an awareness, and learns from his experience in this traumatic time of fighting these terrorists in this 35-story tower.
Yeah.
But in that arc, I mean, it's a different hero.
It's interesting because they both are characters that end up sacrificing their, comfort and safety for others. George kind of does it with kind of quiet determination and sacrificing what he wants to do with his life continuously for, his brother, his dad, or the building and loan. And then Bruce Willis's character does it as John McClane, but does it with a little bit more explosions.
Yeah.
But it's all about saving his wife. And
it is, but it's also a little less selfless. There's a little more, ego is always a part of these kind of characters. It's natural, it's human.
Hence why there's this moment, and I was thinking about this when I was watching it, where he could throw the first guy that gets killed, I forget his name, that he ultimately puts on the office chair and it writes on it.
Sweater.
There's a point where he throws him in the elevator and he's going to send him down. And then he kind of looks over and he sees like the Christmas decorations and he gets this little smirk, right? Yeah. So that's an example of what you're talking about. They kind of, they have this little bit of swagger and...
They're almost anti-hero.
Yeah.
Almost, which I think is reflective of that time period and what was coming. It's very different then, but again, both ego-driven roles. I mean, obviously our main character, George, in It's a Wonderful Life, has a situation occur where $8,000 is misplaced as an investment, and the main antagonist, Henry Potter, basically is the architect of that incident.
Yeah.
And it puts George in a position in the movie early on where he is contemplating jumping off of a bridge and taking his life due to his inability to secure the future of the building and loan company that he oversees, unwillingly or begrudgingly, but knowing he needs to do it for his family.
Right.
Because again, his brother also, I think, went off to war and then
went off to college and then to war.
To college and that, so it was a different storyline. But put in positions and then rising up and making something more of it. But we're this far into this podcast, and we barely talked about architecture. And it's just. So
I'm curious.
So I want to get into that.
What is that? I guess we can. These are two places that it really contrasts. You kind of have this. And I know just enough to be dangerous, so this is really your area of expertise.
Hey.
This idea of urbanization and suburbs and whatnot, because It's a Wonderful Life is set in a small town, and it's about building homes for people to, essentially have the American dream versus Die Hard, which is big, glitzy, corporate tower.
Yeah.
It's big city LA, right?
And they have more in common than we think sometimes at first blush. And I think it's a great point to jump into that, especially with It's a Wonderful Life, because it's so not apparent at first. The movie's not about this, but these movies also, like any good piece of art, reflect the time and the period we're in, even if it's subconscious. And they both are using the architecture around them to tell their story.
Yeah.
And so Die Hard, we covered this in the last time we did the holiday movies, and we talked about it a little bit today. It started off as Fox's headquarters, which is why it got used. But that building is called Nakatomi Tower, and we talked all about how that was a character in the movie. And so it may have had a slightly different role. But what we didn't talk about last time was the fact that movie was done at a time when high corporate architecture, large glass towers, the granite-covered towers, they were being here in Dallas where we're filming this. We have 5 or 6 really large examples that are over 500 feet tall. Some of them are approaching 1,000, and this is very high postmodern architecture and style and design at a time period when the scale of these buildings, what speaks to the typology of corporate architecture. If you look at Fox, the tower there in Century City in Los Angeles, it is not a tower born of the downtown core or an urban area. It did not need to be a 35-story tower on that site. It was a reflection of the values of a company at a time period to build something that big. It's not an urban building at all, and it's very apparent in the film, as you see many of the scenes where the police and SWAT teams approach, FBI is involved.
Yeah, when Sergeant Powell comes out of the convenience store when he first gets the call, and he's just bought all these Twinkies supposedly for his pregnant wife, and walks out, and he just kind of thinks for a second, and then he turns and looks, and it's the only thing that's behind him. You'd think that he's in this convenience store in this neighborhood, and it's just this massive tower behind him.
Yeah. And I was saying this a moment ago, but if you read here in Dallas, again, I mentioned City Place Tower.
Yeah.
David Dillon, our previous architectural critic for the Dallas Morning News, wrote about this a lot. He did a book called 1936 to 1986, where he covers architectural styles of Dallas. And near the end of that book, he talks all about this kind of corporate architecture and the rise of this.
And that was built about the same time, right?
Exactly.
And it's one half of a pair.
Yeah, and City Place Tower could have been a series of low-rise buildings, would have made more sense from certain measures of value.
Yeah.
But for the message they wanted to convey, they built it as a tower with a plan for a second. And that second tower was, the reason it's not built partially is because it was on a freedman's cemetery site, which exists across the way there now. But we'll come back to that. So talking about the architecture and you brought up more of the urbanization and things like that. And I wanted to focus first on Die Hard because that is a part of that role. They made a decision consciously to build this suburban office tower. And since then, there's, if you go to Century City now, there are probably 10 towers of that size or taller over there.
Now it fits, but it was not at the time.
But even still, it's kind of an outlier on the edge, not unlike City Place Tower here in Dallas. But you think, okay, fine, I get it. The tower is on the poster for the movie. It's clearly a character in the movie. How does that tie back to It's a Wonderful Life? And in the same way, It's a Wonderful Life is not about the urbanization. It's not about anything architectural. It's about people. It's about relationships. But it is about the community and the role. I think one of the lines at the end of the movie is that, or one of the lessons really is that we all have value through our friendships, right? That's an important part of this, this journey in this movie. And no one is lost who doesn't have friends, or I'm
something along that line. Yeah.
But to that point, that's about the community, and the community influences and is influenced by, like all architecture, its surroundings and the built environment. And we talked about the front porch earlier and the connection of that in the architecture of that movie that was all filmed on this kind of reused set from Cimarron. The city the town they live in, this fictional town in New York, is a tight-knit community. And George's
everybody
role,
knows everybody else's business.
And George has a huge part of that. And it's part of his journey. His arc is to understand, while he may have made a mistake or had a failure, which actually wasn't even he wasn't even aware it wasn't his fault. That burden wasn't to lie on just him alone. It was his community to help build him back up, and he had to go through this Christmas Carol-esque inspired journey to see that value that he brought, that how much the role of the community played, and it wasn't just about him, which I find ironic because his character also has aspirations to leave this small community and make something more of his life. He chooses not to for the circumstances presented to him, but he wants to do more. He wants to be great. He wants to redevelop and create a new city and break all this down. And the irony of that is it reflects that time period, that American dream for hope, for new development, for the modernism was coming into vogue already at this point by several decades, and into technology, and into the homes we were building and the communities we were building. And so this idea that came out of this of these future towns that followed from this. I mean, it just speaks to that on a subconscious level that we aspired to make these new cities, these new suburbs. And when we learn that when he goes through the journey and it never lives and sees what the world would have been like without him, our main antagonist, Henry Potter, builds his new slum, basically on the land that would have been the park, the subdivision community that George wanted to create. And it's just very poetic because the counter argument is that those kind of communities that came out of that time period, the rise of the subdivision and suburban sprawl that has plagued this country and plagued other countries as well since then, with the advent of the car, only further exacerbated that. And the Highway Act in 1955, 10 years after this movie, have made a problem we've been trying to solve for a very long time. And this neighborhood no longer had, the one he envisioned didn't have porches, it didn't have these trees. It was more about the internal home, the individual, the family, the growing family. And that was the erosion, as I mentioned Jane Jacobs earlier in The Death of Life of Great American Cities. We didn't have eyes on the street anymore. It was about being internal to your community. And it created a lot of communities that have failed. And new urbanist practices that have arisen in the 2000s and through today are trying to improve upon that and bring back some of these lessons learned over the American century about how to properly create communities that thrive. And I think it's just interesting to see how that kind of comes full circle on this because the movie gained all this prominence as a classic and really as a Christmas film in the late 70s and in the 80s at a time period when we were seeing the final urban decay of the very neighborhoods that we were espousing as being the future in the 40s and 50s with good intentions. And that goes for both movies.
It's interesting that you talk
heavy stuff, I know, but
no, it's good. I think there's in understanding kind of what you were talking about with the values that both characters realize with relationships. I think that's something that has allowed both of these movies, particularly It's a Wonderful Life, to become classics. Because when it was made, budget was around $3 million. It made around $3 million. It didn't even cover production costs. Like it was not necessarily a success.
No.
And it did get nominated for 5 Academy Awards.
Actually.
5 Academy Awards. It got nominated for actor, directing, film editing, picture, and sound recording.
But then it won one as well.
It did not win any.
It won for technical achievement.
That's not listed.
Look at
that on the screen.
The 19th Academy Awards for technical achievement for the creation of.
I'm not looking at the technical achievement. You are correct. Snow, which actually, that's such a cool story. So
the 6th Academy Award.
We're going to come back to the scrappiness. Okay. We're going to come back to the scrappiness, but let's talk about Snow for 1 second, because up until then it was cornflakes. And when people would walk on it, it would cause so much noise that they'd have to ADR or record after the fact the sound. And so he came up with, I have it here in my notes somewhere. Hold on a second. Russell Sherman, he came up with a new compound that used water, soap flakes, foamite, and sugar.
It's amazing.
And it was basically chemical snow. And before then, it had all been the cornflakes, and after that, it kind of made a whole shift.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what he won technically.
He won Academy Award.
I tell you what, we've got the comments open now in these episodes. So if you want to make an argument one way or the other, go put it in the comments. But back to the scrappiness, I love how this film was not a massive success by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
In fact, you could make an argument it was a failure at first.
Yeah.
But as I think is true with movies that endure and films that stay relevant for 60, 80 years afterwards, it struck a chord. It resonated with people about that idea of relationship and to a certain extent family being important, having value that transcends buildings or technology or other things. It stays there and is something that continues to resonate with you long after you've watched it. I mean, it is one of the cult classics. That is one of probably the 4 or 5 films we watch every single holiday season.
Absolutely.
Redemption. It is.
It's redemption. Everyone loves
a redemption story. What do you think it is in Die Hard that has made it such a cultural icon?
Well, I think, it's considered one of the greatest action films of all time.
Right.
And it is. It sets a course with a low budget film of a very likable character with a set of circumstances that, from our perspective as the viewer, we're able to glean a little bit over his faults.
Yeah.
Because we get to see him at his best. We get a hint of him at his worst, but not really. We really see him at his best. And we see a character also go through a redemption story and reconnect with his estranged wife. He saves the day.
Yeah.
Gets the girl. It's all these kind of somewhat outdated, but still kind of iconic tropes in filmmaking or storytelling that makes it memorable. You have a very, very bad antagonist who is lovable in his own sense.
Alan Rickman's amazing.
He's amazing in this.
And it launches, because he really wasn't a villain before this. He was a theater actor, if I remember correctly.
Then we get him in like Prince of Thieves.
Yeah.
As
Sheriff
Nottingham.
Sheriff Nottingham, yep.
Yeah.
And it launched his villain career. I think the scrappiness for me from Die Hard comes from a little bit differently. I mean, again, we talked about this in the last episode. They ended up shooting in the Fox Tower because they didn't have budget to go do what they wanted to do. It was with a incredibly unlikely rom-com star in Bruce Willis. There were so many reasons why that film shouldn't succeed. In fact, there's a great we may have mentioned this last time. There's a little 1-hour episode of The Films We Love on Netflix, and they do it on Die Hard, and it is
it's fantastic,
spectacular. You should totally go and watch it. But it had this scrappiness too of being like kind of an underdog, and then it becomes this huge success.
Yeah. Well, it had comedy, it had romance,
a little bit of everything.
Drama, it had action, it has it all.
Yeah.
For a movie that originally didn't even have Bruce Willis on the poster.
Yeah, it was just the tower.
Just the tower. It says a lot about where that movie could stretch to it. But again, it's a fun movie.
Okay.
Both these movies are fun movies that make you think, but they're fun.
So one of the things that's true, and ultimately, and I think, you know, you and I both watch a lot of movies, and we probably watch a fair amount of fringe movies, and there's a fair amount of them that don't.
I know what you're talking about.
They don't.
I watch only, you know, blockbusters.
They don't end on a happy note, and I think there's something to be said for. And I get that it's kind of a commercial success thing, but there's plenty of movies. Look at the Hallmark Channel that have happy endings at the end. That's not what makes an incredible movie. But I think that the fact that these movies have a redemption at the end, and you walk away from that feeling good.
Yeah.
I think that contributes to why they have stuck around as long as they have.
Yeah.
I think we need to talk about why, you know, It's a Wonderful Life. I think the conversation is less prominent. Everybody kind of sees that as a holiday or Christmas movie. And in neither of these films really does Christmas or the holidays play an important role. It's not a character in the film. It just happens to be a setting that adds tension to it.
Mm-hmm.
The setting for It's a Wonderful Life could have really been any time. It's about self-crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Die Hard, same thing. Like, it was never intended to be a holiday movie, but I think we can very easily make the case it is a Christmas movie. I have an argument for it, but I want to know why you think Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Because I think we're both on the same page, but I'm curious if we're on the same page for the same reasons. And we didn't do this in the last episode.
We did
We're
not.
making the case why Die Hard is a Christmas movie. And if you disagree with us, you can go put it in the comments, and we will find a way to respond to it. I promise you.
Well, I think that there's unfortunately a technical answer to this and an emotional answer. And a technical answer is if you go to the handbook on Christmas movies, it describes all this. I have a copy you can borrow.
Thank you.
It's hard to find, but basically says that
Out of print.
If a movie centers around scenes or a time of year that are Christmas scenes, it by default is a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
Which you know, you can argue that, but it's in the handbook. You know, it's a fictional handbook, of course.
What's the emotional side of it?
A redemption story is a big part of this. Someone started on the naughty list and got on the nice list. Doing the right things altruistically.
That's a great point.
And we end on Christmas morning, early in the wee hours of Christmas morning.
It's a lot easier to see that in the It's a Wonderful Life, because everybody at the end, Clarence gets his wings. They're all happy, and Die Hard is
Look, Daddy.
Yeah, exactly. An angel gets his wings. And
who doesn't know that scene?
It's amazing.
That very scene is in other movies.
Yeah.
Like
it's copied multiple times.
Like literally not just even copied, it's literally shown in other movies as a reference point sometimes.
So I don't know that I ever picked this up, so I will give a little bit of vulnerability here. I don't know this explicitly. Is Die Hard on Christmas Eve?
Well, I can answer that because of the magic of filmmaking. Our producer just confirmed this. It is on Christmas Eve.
So they ride out Christmas morning with, John and Holly, Argyle as the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer driving them in the limo.
Indeed. Just the way that It's a Wonderful Life ends on, they're all singing
Old Lang Syne? No. Yeah, is it Old Lang Syne?
Old Lang Syne, and the bell rings and they're at the Christmas tree having the party,
wings.
welcoming his brother back from the war.
I do think part of this, and it's great to have this argument because there's there is for us, a definite answer. But for some people, there's not a definite answer. And they also believe in flat earth theory. But the point of this is, it is the other part, and it kind of goes to the emotional side. I grew up watching these movies at Christmas. And so for me, it's not that I can't watch them at any other time, but they're a staple for when I watch those movies.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things, too, where I think, speaking for when I was a kid as well, and even past these movies coming out, because I wasn't old enough to watch Die Hard when it came out. I did not see it for probably another 8 years.
Yeah.
There are so many Christmas movies that are more strictly focused to the drama and the emotion, and not an action plot necessarily, or action is secondary.
Yeah.
And so to get a movie that suddenly had this action character who's lovable. I mean, the movie's violent, and it has some very violent scenes in it. But for the time period, it's fairly subdued. If you think of what was being made in the late 70s and early 80s, it's a little easier on the blood, if you will. But it gave us something. It gave us a juxtaposition of what a Christmas movie could be.
Yeah.
In some ways, you could say it's the advent of the modern Christmas movie. We're moving away from the Miracle on 34th Streets and It's a Wonderful Lives and getting movies more like that. Let's talk about, and I don't want to say it's your favorite scene, but let's talk about pick one of your favorite scenes in both these
good
movies.
question.
I'd like to think like, what's a movie that endears Die Hard to you? Or what's a moment in the movie that makes you
Okay, so
or love coming back to?
For Die Hard, this is so silly. The scene where he is in the, I guess it's the bathroom, where he rubs his feet on the carpet after having been told by the guy on the plane. And I travel a fair amount. That scene, like I can't tell you the number of times I've been sitting in a hotel room and I've done that with my feet and thought of that scene. So I don't know if it's the one that's my favorite scene, but it's the one that I think about probably the most consistently. But I'm a romantic at heart, so I love the last scenes. Like for It's a Wonderful Life, the scene that I think is probably the most powerful is at the bridge, 100%. Like I like that conflict, but my favorite scene is at the end when they're all around the tree. Actually, I'll tell you my favorite line though from It's a Wonderful Life. I was thinking about this while you were talking earlier.
Can you do it in a Jimmy Stewart voice?
No, well it's Clarence that says
it's Clarence.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can't do it in a Clarence voice either. But Jimmy Stewart says, the 18 men on that transport, were saved. And Clarence looks at him and goes, they were saved by my brother Harry. And he looks at him and he goes, Harry wasn't there to save those men because you weren't there to save Harry.
I can't believe you picked that line.
Why?
That is actually the very scene I was going to talk about with his brother. Yeah.
And I have a brother, and it just like, man, that even saying it, like it's a little bit in the throat. It hits home.
It does.
That's probably my favorite line.
I feel validated. That's a good one. So, wow.
What's your favorite?
Well, besides that one for Die Hard,
yes,
it's actually near the end of the movie. All of those final scenes too. We get kind of a surprise second ending. When there's a moment when Hans is number 2 guy. He has a machine gun and is going to fire one more shot, and our Reginald takes him out. But it's actually not that. It's around that same time. It's actually when another character important to the movie, the reporter, the obnoxious reporter, and I can't remember the actor's name.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He comes up and wants to get back in the face and complain, and our heroine character finally gets a little more agency and opportunity. And she has some throughout the movie. She plays a pivotal role and is shown as a strong character who happens to be female, and I like that for that movie. I think it contributes a little contribution to the well-roundedness and inclusivity of a movie like this. But she gets to sock him in the face, punch him hard, and you're like, and you can see. After everything that her estranged husband has done, action hero wise, to do this was in some ways equally important in their moment to protect their relationship. He was coming in and intruding on that. She just sets him back.
Oh, it's such a good
Which is great because in the we will jumping ahead in the sequel to that, I believe he has a restraining order.
Yes, he does.
Her.
I can't sit next to her on the plane.
Both on the plane together in Die Hard 2, which we'll cover next Christmas.
So that's the next question. Are we going to graduate? Are we going to force Adam to graduate us to Die Hard 2 next year?
I think we need to include the aviation sector.
Yes.
On that.
I mean, I've got to point out your amazing hat. It's Comet's Flight School, so you're kind of bringing aviation in right there. I'm really excited. Well, hopefully you have enjoyed this conversation.
One of your reindeers here.
Yeah, exactly. If you've agreed, or even better, if you've completely disagreed with us, please feel free to put it down in the comments. This next year, we are going to do a much better job of interacting with people in the comments, and I think we'll probably spend the first little bit of some of our architecture and film episodes responding to it.
It's tough. I mean, there's hundreds of comments, and we try to get through them all.
Yeah,
but
we're gonna pick the best. So be witty. Don't just be a hater. Happy holiday season to you, man.
And happy holidays to you, too. And just want to say, Yippee-ki-yay, mother...